A little bit intimidating at first to somebody like that to trust me with all of these tasks and have this grand mindset for me. I guess I never really had somebody believe in me in that capacity before in an educational setting. So it was intimidating at first, but as the semester and as the year and years continued, it became more and more not intimidating, but reassuring. So it was never the research process never had anything like you would see in a movie, like somebody standing over your shoulder and berating you for not doing something right. It was never ever anything close to that.
All right, welcome back to Economics with Dr. A. I'm your host, Dr. Abdullah Barani, Associate Professor of Economics and Associate Dean at the Hale College of Business. And this is the second episode of Where Are They Now? A conversation with alumni of the Hale Fellows Program. And today we have a graduate from the class of 2019, Tyler Kent. Tyler's on the show. Tyler, how are you doing today?
Doing great, making me feel old. 2019 feels like a million years ago.
I know, time flies. I always tell people that your social capital diminishes drastically after you graduate. You think you're the coolest kid, and then age kicks in, and then you're the old head. Fawaz is looking at you right now like, wow, this guy's old. Right, Fawaz?
Yeah.
Fawaz, when you hear 2019, what do you think?
I think I was in high school then.
Okay.
That was my senior year in high school.
So Ty, welcome to the club, the Old Person Club. Excited to have you on the show, and I really want people to know your story because you're one of those people that maximize your experience as a fellow. And I remember looking back at our experience in the fellow program, and it was a time of experimentation, trying new things, but most importantly, having fun in the learning process. Is that how you remember it?
Yeah, definitely. I remember when I first heard about it, it was kind of like whatever Matt and I think Jacob. Who's the other Jacob?
Jacob Kors and
Yeah,
Ben Reynolds were right before you.
Okay, yeah, I remember you guys were the three of you were kind of just working on whatever. There was no formality to it. There was no like structure, and it kind of developed as I was in college and in the program. And when I graduated, I would say established its base and became
Yeah.
solid. And then ever since I graduated, it's just expanded up. So I guess when I graduated, it was just a concrete pad in the ground for a home, and now it's just kind of like the home you live in, the neighborhood you're in now, Doctor A. So.
Yeah. Well, without the foundation that you all have established, the Hale Fellows program wouldn't be where it is today. And one of the reasons that we're doing this is we want to tell the story of what I call academic innovation. So there's a couple of things that I want to get across today. One, what was the program when you first started? And then two, what did you learn through your time here? So let's start with this baby idea that started, I think 2018 was the first fellows program. How is the program for you? What do you remember what you did?
So I remember. Are you asking from like when I became a fellow, or what my first interaction? Yeah, okay. So I remember that we had this kind of like you said, Ben and Jacob were the kind of the first, and then Matt Fry and I became kind of the second iteration of it. And I think if I remember correctly, at that point, you were kind of trying to establish this undergrad research, right? Like there wasn't any formality to it other than the capstone in economics class, which was iffy at best from a what's next in economics standpoint.
Yeah.
Not to disrespect NKU, but the thought process behind it was never to continue in economics, never to go to grad school. So Dr. A kind of took this personally and said, well, we need to make sure we create this pipeline for kids to have this research experience so that they can go into grad school prepared, not blind. So I think our first Eco 392 class, I don't know if I was in the first one or the second one, but whatever it was, it became formalized. Like, hey, you're going to learn stata. You're going to learn these research methods. You're going to learn models you haven't heard of before in the other classes. So it was more of a dialogue class. Kind of, it felt like grad school, right?
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't traditional undergrad, and it was really for those for kids who wanted that kind of next look into what would be next in economics if they decided to take that step. So it was. I remember the first kind of class you were like, all right, what are you interested in? What do you want to learn more about? And I think that was the hardest part about it, is trying to figure out where you wanted to narrow your focus. Um, but obviously, I think, and we can continue the conversation. I don't want to jump ahead of myself, but it was formalized research to advance your academic career towards grad school, I think, is what its purpose was, if I recall correctly.
Yeah, 100%. That's how I remember it. It feels like ages, like Fawaz said. And by the way, for the people listening in and that don't see this conversation, we also have Antoine Batts with us today. So this is being recorded in a live audience format once again, and they will chime in with some questions. But some of the things that I recall is Eco 392 was, for people listening in, don't know the prefixes, Eco 392 is research for economist. And the idea is for students to take an idea from start to finish during a semester, and with the hopes that they present it at a conference. It was not mandatory, but it was highly encouraged. And I remember that year, Eco 392 had Matt Fry and Ty Kent in the class. And the theme was very similar to this year's theme, Fawaz. It was financial literacy. This year's theme is financial behaviors. And I remember us just geeking out for hours about just random ideas that we had. And the thing that I appreciate about you, Tyler, and especially having Matt with you, and by the way, Matt is going to be on the show in July, but is you guys just were curious. You wanted to learn more, and you appreciated have the space to ask these questions. I remember one of the first things that we had to do was learn Tableau. Do you remember that?
Yeah, absolutely. I vividly remember the first assignment in that class was create this Tableau report based on whatever, and I was like, I have no idea what this program is. I've never touched it. It was more, and honestly, I was a little like not scared but nervous to disappoint, and I think we'll probably end up talking about that. But it was just, be curious, let your curiosity run wild with this and see what you can do. And I remember I probably made some sort of crappy graphic of the United States and with nonsense in it, but I remember it being cool. I was like, oh, this thing's cool. Like, you can probably do a whole lot with this. So, and funny enough, like, and I'm sure we'll talk about this because you mentioned this, I use Tableau every day in work right now. So,
Wow.
I've actually gotten, that's a huge sticking point on my resume is Tableau and understanding how it works. So, definitely real life skills coming out of that for sure.
And yeah, we'll definitely talk about work today after we talk about your experience. And one thing that Fawaz and the other fellows and I have been trying to identify is what is the reason behind the success for the Hale Fellows program. So looking back at it, why do you think this program was successful, at least for you?
Yeah, I think it all comes back to the camaraderie of the group. So with any other class at NKU that I took, it was always you go to class, you do your homework, you do your assignments, you go to the next one. That's not how the fellows program was. It's not how 392 was. That was always the class you're like, okay, I'm ready to go to this. I want to have this discussion. It didn't really feel like class. It more felt like Eco Club or Econ Club. It just an extension of that. So it was something that you're genuinely interested in. So I think that made it easier for everybody involved. Not only that, we were uplifted and empowered to do what we wanted to do, whereas so many, and this isn't meant to sound like I'm trying to butter up Dr. A, but whereas so many other classes and professors are just trying to check their boxes, give their exams, and move on to the next group. But that's not what Eco 392 or the Fellows program is. It's about empowering students to continue their education, be genuinely curious, and learn. So I think that was the difference for me.
No, I appreciate it because Fawaz and I have spent a lot of time trying to figure out what are the secret ingredients to success. And with each cohort, and we're going through it right now, we're trying to replicate the success that we've had. And without having a blueprint, we don't know exactly what we're doing. So hearing from you all, the alumni of the program, what was impactful or what resonated is important. So when you were part of the program, you got to travel to the Eastern Economic Association. Do you remember that?
Vividly, absolutely.
So Fawaz just came back from his first Eastern Economic Association. His experience was totally different than yours because Fawaz went by himself. Well, him and I.
Okay.
You had a big group. Do you remember the
Yeah,
impact of the group?
absolutely. So if I remember correctly, it was me, Matt, Dakota. I think Ben was there. I know Tiana was there. Jacob was there.
Blake.
Jolie and Blake.
Yeah.
It was, and it was such a fun group. I remember that was like, and one of my regrets to this day is not staying more in touch. But I think life continues the way it is. I think everybody gets busy. But it was first time I was ever on an airplane. I was scared to
Yeah.
death of flying, so kind of got me over that hump. First time really, first time in New York City for sure, which was incredible. First time besides KEAs at any kind of formalized conference
Yeah.
with presentations and stuff. So it was just an incredible opportunity.
Yeah, I remember that group. And actually, one thing that I really appreciate between you, Ben, Dakota, and Matt is you made it seem like you guys don't keep in touch, but we have a group chat
Yeah.
actually, and on multiple platforms where we communicate. Maybe we don't see each other as often, but we're talking to each other frequently. So you're doing your part of staying in touch, but it started in that trip, and that trip opened up so many doors. When I talk to people about the importance of taking students to conferences, it's these stories because you came back. You had never been on a flight before. You came back and you're like, okay, the travel bug and the education bug have kicked in, and you immediately signed up for your next opportunity. Do you remember what it was?
It was study abroad in Germany next summer. And
Yeah.
I did that solely because of like I was very skeptical of travel
Mhm.
abroad because it's just so expensive. But
Yeah.
I think the big thing looking into that was it was doable, and we ended up getting a load of scholarships from the college itself.
Mhm.
And that was just I would encourage everybody and their mother to do study abroad while they're in college, especially if they've never been out of the states.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, definitely the conference was the kick in the butt I needed because I was like, oh, I can do this. I can get on a plane for a couple hours. It's fine.
So you went to Germany for your study abroad. How long were you out there for?
I think like 6 weeks, if I remember correctly.
Mhm.
It was
Hey,
go ahead.
go ahead. No, go ahead.
I was gonna say it's an incredible place. We weren't even in like a really nice town either. I mean, it's Bremen.
Hmm.
We heard regularly why we were there. It's the Detroit of Germany, but it was still it is what you make of it. And we had
Yeah.
an amazing time. The group that we went with, we did everything and anything we could in that town. And we went to a group of us went to Amsterdam one weekend. Incredible. I went to the west coast of France to visit some friends.
Mhm.
Um, just an incredible opportunity, and it was the first time. And I think this might be unique to me, at least on this call. But it was the first time in my life I felt like a minority, and that was a
Yeah.
powerful thing for me to learn. Because you can empathize or sympathize with people, but until you experience it, you can't say you know what's going on. So it was
That,
a
that's that's so powerful, Tyler. I always tell people that if you're going to be a leader, you have to make sure that at one point in your life, you're the minority in the room. So you understand how the marginalized or the minority might feel when when the tables have turned. So
mhm,
I'm glad that you highlighted that because it does open up your eyes.
absolutely.
So you did a great job writing a paper, which I love, as part of the Hale Fellows program. How impactful was writing that paper to your current career?
Well, I mean, I wouldn't have my job today if I didn't do that research and didn't write that paper. So, um, do you want me to get into what I do now, or you
Yeah,
want me to hold
yeah.
off?
Tell me what
Okay,
you're doing these days.
I work for Fidelity Investments. I'm an education consultant. Basically, what I do every day is I teach. I always like to tell people two things. I get paid to look pretty on camera, and I get paid to teach things to adults that they should have learned in high school. So, um, primarily work with small and medium sized businesses across the Midwest, teaching people financial literacy topics, everything from basic budgeting, emergency savings, all the way to estate planning, Social Security, and Medicare, and everything in between. So the way I got this job is right out of college. I got an offer to work at Fidelity just in our customer service department, which what isn't fabulous, but it is a great opportunity straight out of college. And I was doing that all the way through COVID, and then I was looking for jobs for friends who lost their jobs during COVID, and I found this opportunity. And I remember I applied for it, just didn't think I would get it because it's basically like middle of career level stuff. Um, and my application or my resume always has that section, still does, published in working papers, even though I'm not in academia anymore. And my manager to this day, the first thing she said, she's like, I read your paper, and that's crazy that you're a published author
Mhm.
in financial literacy. Like, we need you on the team. So if it wasn't for the work that we did together, I would not have my career. I wouldn't have my house. I wouldn't have my car. I wouldn't have anything. I would still be a phone jockey to this day, probably.
Well, that is definitely empowering, and I'm sure Fawaz and Antoine have questions about that experience. I will say that there is another part of your fellow experience. We used to have a research track and a teaching track. Do you remember
Mm-hmm.
that? And
Yeah.
you and Naomi were leaders on the teaching track, and you actually helped us develop a relationship with a local high school where you all would go in every Friday or one Friday a month to
Mm-hmm.
teach financial literacy.
Yeah. And it was my alma mater, so I was really passionate about that. I don't think I hyped that part up as much when I got this job as I should have, but yeah, I think it started out with my Amanda Dempsey, or
Mhm.
Dr. Dempsey now, um, literally just seeing something that we were doing, and she's like, "Oh my god, that's crazy! I would love to like have you come talk to the kids." And the best part about the fellow program and working with the center was you brought an idea like that to Dr. A, and he would never say no. He would find a way to make it work. So I mean, that's literally what we did. We went in and had one conversation, and then they're like, "Well, Tyler and Naomi need to be in here teaching this."
Yeah.
So, and we made it happen.
Yeah, and I remember the students were really responsive to you all more than they were responsive to me, and that actually has impacted the way we do some of these trainings is having relatively younger peers to peers education.
Hmm.
But in your point over here, you mentioned that Dr. Dempsey saw what we were doing. And the way she saw what we were doing was the power of social media. We were telling our story and having fun, just like we are right now with Fawaz and Antoine and through our newsletter. And I always tell people, tell your story. Don't wait till the story is done. Um, Build in public, and because building in public opens up other doors, and this is a great example of that, and it really helped my career as well, because at that time I was running the Center for Economic Education, and my the way I was evaluated was how many schools am I engaging with. So you bringing up this idea and making the connection really helped my career too. So in short, thank you for doing that. Antoine, Fawaz, do you all have any questions?
I think my question is gonna be, I didn't know you published the paper. I thought it was just like you just went to KES and the EES and it was done. So can you tell me the process of how your paper got published?
Yeah, the to the best that I can recall. So I I always I never really saw it as being published, but Dr. A was very insistent that it is a publication. It's in NKU's undergrad research journal, which you does get published. It is, you can Google it and it shows up, and it's just like any other journal. Um, but I remember that was something at the end that Dr. A is like, "Oh, you guys need to," or like he said, it wasn't required or it wasn't, but he's like, "You should do this. You should submit to this." And I was sitting there, I'm like, "This isn't good enough. Like, it's something I worked on it, and Dr. A and I worked on it very hard, but I don't think it's worthy of this." But he's like, "What's the worst they can do? Say no." So submitted it off. We get it back. I remember we had an idea who the reviewer was, but we didn't know for sure. So we kind of knew what we had to do. But we got it back accepted with revisions, is what it's called. So the reviewer or the publisher will mark up your article and say things like, "Hey, this is what I think you should put here, or this is what I think you should change, move this here." So we made those changes, resubmitted it, and then it was accepted. And then it was, and then it was published. I don't really remember much else about it other than that was kind of the flow of it. It took a couple months after the final draft or whatever was finished and submitted, but I remember it being a pretty honestly painless process from what I originally had anticipated. For whatever reason, I thought that the second I submitted it, they would be like, "Okay, come in and sit down with us, and we're going to interrogate you, and we're going to interrogate your research." But no, it's really the paper speaks for itself, and then you fix things as they come up.
And that's what I love about that experience, Fawaz, is Tyler had no idea what the review process would look like, but he trusted the process. And there is something that you learn from having other people read your work and give you feedback, and that is, these skills that I try to push on, which are coachability, growth mindset, ability to persist even when people tell you, like, you are not clear here. It's easy to raise your hands and say, you know what, it's done, the project's done, there's no need for me to go through this process. But as Ty said, it's published in NKU's undergraduate journal, and that's an option for all of our Hale fellows that are going through it this year. He used the term "we." I will say that was all Tyler's work. I just motivated him in the sense that said, you know what, yeah, you can do this and you should do it, and I'm on this journey with you to support you. And that offer stands with any of the fellows or alumni of NKU. So thanks for that question, Fawaz. Antoine, do you have a question?
Yeah, so me and you probably come from a similar background, except for differing schools. I've never been a student for Dr. A, never even been in the same state during college time. But you and I both seem to have an undergrad research background, and I think that's something that's often ignored by students. And in my opinion, it tends to lead to higher earnings once you get straight out of college. At least it did for me. Do you have any tips for any student that want to get into undergraduate research that may be able, that may help them out in the long run? Because, like I said, I did research. I had a research assistant job when I was in college, and it translated into higher earnings straight out of graduation. And I think it's something that's often ignored by, students as a potential advantage.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think so. If I understand your question, you just asking kind of like what is the advantage of it, like or like what did I get out of it?
Yeah, what were the advantages, and also how would you, any tips for encouraging people to go into it?
Yeah, absolutely. So, obviously, I think the what I got out of it was big things like Dr. A said, coachability. That you need that in any job you do. It doesn't matter if you're working in a restaurant or you're the CEO of a company. You need to be coachable, and that just speaks to your character. People will want to work with you more. People will want to promote you more as you handle feedback and implement it. So I think that speaks for itself. As far as like the research, what I would say to somebody who's debating it is it's something else to add to your resume, right? So we can never be too involved, too curious, and especially the way the world's going right now is with the data behind anything is the most important part of any business. We at Fidelity called data like what term do they use? It's like it's our next asset, right? Companies all over the world are looking to protect data, use data as a new tool. So learning research and learning research methods just adds to your ability to interpret data better and expand your options to careers. Um, Additionally, I would say that too many kids coming out of college these days, and I say that as if I'm not a kid myself, but too many kids coming out of college these days are just going to the class, checking boxes, and going home. Maybe they do a frat or a sorority, maybe they do a club, but none of them are really trying to explore or get involved. Um, and there's nothing inherently wrong with that. All I'm saying about people who do that is they're one in a million. There's a million of them. So if you want to differentiate yourself and stand out from the crowd, taking opportunities like research is going to be a great way to do that.
And it helps you grow, right?
Yeah.
It challenges you. It requires you to employ your critical thinking skills, persistence, right? You're working on a project for 16, 18 weeks, sometimes a year, like Fawaz has been working on his research, and that stands out. It also opens up other doors. You're going to present, you're going to maybe your next opportunity is in the area that you have been researching, and you feel more confident because you've spent so much time thinking about this question. So, absent a cost, and at NKU, this is a free opportunity, and sometimes you actually get paid to take on this opportunity. So why pass it up? One thing that you did mention earlier, Ty, and I want to get back to it, and because I'm seeing it with this year's fellows, and I think this is what it is. I'm not sure, but you said you did not want to disappoint me. How did that show up, or where did that fear come from?
Uh, I think it was just. I mean, I think it's my personal issues. To be honest with you, I don't know where they come from, but
Mhm.
somebody as, again, not to hype up Dr. A too much, but somebody who's as successful and wise as Dr. A is, for me, it was just a little bit intimidating at first to somebody like that to trust me with all of these tasks and have this grand mindset for me. I guess I never really had somebody believe in me in that capacity before, in an educational setting. So it was intimidating at first, but as the semester and as the year and years continued, it became more and more not intimidating, but reassuring.
Yeah.
So it was never, the research process never had anything like you would see in a movie, like somebody standing over your shoulder and berating you for not doing something right. It was never ever anything close to that. Um, but I guess for me, just going into it, it was the fear of the unknown more than anything. I didn't know what to expect, and I was kind of taking a leap of faith with it. But as you continue to go through it, it's more and more, hey, this is great. Here's where we can go forward, and that's the kind of the evolution of it. It's never, hey, you didn't do this right. It's always, hey, this is how we can do this better. Um, and I think that speaks volumes not only for the program, but for kind of sets the example for what work should be in general. So I always set that as the standard. Like if my job and my feedback from my superiors doesn't look like what I got during the fellows, I know something's wrong. Um, so I think that's kind of
Thank
my
you.
interpretation of it.
Thank you for sharing that, because, and I'll ask for Waz here, but we're 3 weeks into our summer fellows program for this year, and one thing that I'm dying for the students to do is be more expressive, to share their ideas. But I think there's a bit of that fear of, I don't want to disappoint. Fawaz, what do you think?
I feel like coming into research, like the I'll say like our mentorship lab, something like that.
Hmm.
It's more on we don't want to disappoint the doctor. It's like if I say something, it should be like I don't understand what I'm saying, so I don't want to say it. It's just like keeping it to ourselves. It's more of like confidence. You don't have confidence in yourself until
Mm-hmm.
I think like what helped me during my time because I was in I joined the group last year and we had James and Becca, so they were the one leading the conversation and I was like okay, I was listening to them, so that confidence grew over time because I wanted to be like them, so it grew over time and I think that helped me to like not navigate myself.
Thank you, Fawaz. Thank you, Fawaz, for that. So what I'm hearing is we need to reduce this fear of failing or intimidation or disappointing me specifically. How do I do that?
Uh, I'll tell you the only time I ever actually disappointed Dr. A is by apologizing too much. So I think it's just continuing dialogue like this, having
Hmm.
people who've worked through it share their stories. I can't remember. There's some famous quote I think by Einstein said um, something about fearing to fail
Hmm.
is the only downside of failure or something silly like that. But I mean that's really what it is. Like you're not going to be. Nobody expects anybody coming into this program to have a PhD in economics. That's not the point of the
Yeah.
program. So being vulnerable and willing to learn and willing to grow is the point. So if you go into it with that mindset, you're going to be successful, no doubt.
So tomorrow we're actually taking the fellows out to DBL Law. Shout out to DBL Law for giving us their space in Covington. And I'm thinking and I'm hoping that this trip off campus will kind of bring us a little bit closer together and open up opportunities for us to know each other in a space where we're all new to it, right? And this way, maybe we break the hierarchies that exist while you're on campus. Antoine, you haven't been part of the fellows program. If I were to ask you advice on how to break this fear of failure or fear of disappointing me, what would your advice be to me from a leadership standpoint?
That's a good question because it seems like the main problem is imposter syndrome, right? So I don't know. I think you do a good job at it. I think the only thing I can encourage, which is probably something you already do, is encourage them to at least talk to each other, right?
Mhm.
So if you're seen as the common denominator that may be like adding unnecessary pressure, whether it be intentional or not, it's not your intention to make them feel the way they do. Sometimes getting away from you or finding a solution in other people may be the best choice in this
Yeah.
case. And I think that can be easily done by encouraging them to interact with each other. That way they can be like, they'll at least come to understand they have common feelings, right, when it comes to this sort of sense of imposter syndrome. And then I think that also help encourage them to overcome it together as a team too, right? It's very easy to feel like you don't belong in a room, right? Because of, everyone else there is also as brilliant as you are. So, but that's the thing, sometimes you forget that you're in that room for a reason. And I
Yeah.
think by them interacting with each other, they'll be able to remind each other that they all deserve to be there.
Well, one of
Yeah.
the other things that I'm trying. Go ahead, Fawaz. Sorry.
And I think what's gonna help is when you say tell me more. So like that tend to like explain themselves and also like so I think that's gonna help like when you say tell me more, what do you think? What do you think? So I think that helps also.
Yeah, and we're trying something new, or I'm trying something new this year. And tomorrow, when we meet, we're going to be working with a survey for consumer finance, which I've never touched before. And I've told them that I've never touched it. So we're going to be learning about this data set together for the first time. And hopefully, this breaks a bit of hierarchy, and they could teach me something. So we'll see, and I'll update you all. So I appreciate this, but this is something that I've been struggling with this past 3 weeks. The team environment is taking a bit longer to develop than I'm used to. Maybe Tyler, now I'm getting older and I'm losing my touch. Maybe that's what it is, but it's something that we have to invest in. Ty, before we leave today, what I have two more questions. One question is, what are your future plans, and like as you're planning out your career, what are you thinking?
So it's a good question. I'm something I'm trying to like internally figure out right now personally. Um, I'm somebody who like hates to sit in the same spot for too long. So uh, when I started my professional career, I jumped jobs at Fidelity every 6 months because people kept offering me new opportunities. This job, I love it. I get compensated very well. I get incredible flexibility to do stuff like this. It's one of those things where I can't figure out personally if I want to explore different career opportunity at Fidelity, something I've never done before, or go back to grad school because they'll pay for that and just get that MBA and check a box there. Um, I really, really love where I work. The business is incredibly inclusive, has a clear mission, clear values, um, and we're really passionate about expanding access to finance to those underserved. It's a huge initiative right now, so I don't see myself moving companies,
Yeah.
but maybe moving career directions. Like right now, I work, like I said, I work in education, technically relationship management, but I've been offered sales opportunities. I don't see myself as a salesman, but it's hard to turn down the kind of money they make sometimes.
Mhm.
So it's I'm trying to figure that out. What I want my career to kind of look like. There's a lot of different directions it could go, and I think one of the most exciting parts about it is that I'm so early in my professional career, and I could really do anything. And even if I don't like it, I can always figure something else out.
Yeah.
But I think the big thing for me right now is uh, never saying no to an opportunity. Like if something presents itself and it seems like it's an improvement, at least from a monetary standpoint, just because you got to pay your bills, right?
Yeah.
Take the opportunity, learn something new, put it on the resume. If it doesn't work out, try something else. And I think I got a lot of that drive to try something new through the fellows program because that's kind of where I had my first uncomfortable
Mhm.
experience in my academic career is learning that how to work with that team and be comfortable being wrong and learning. So I
Yeah.
think that's part of the drive.
One thing that I truly appreciate about all of the fellows, the alumni, the current and alumni, is this growth mindset, this pursuit to always challenge yourself. And it sounds like you're extremely happy where you are. And Fidelity is a great organization. I was on campus there about I'd say 6 weeks ago at this point, and the amount of career opportunities that you have just within Fidelity are endless. Um, but it sounds like you're looking for that next challenge. You feel comfortable with where you are, and you want to kind of shake things up. So if you're thinking about grad school, I'll put my associate dean for graduate school hat on here. We'd love to have you back at NKU to work on your MBA there. And as you evaluate what your next challenges are, make sure to, and you're really good about this, to include me. I would love to continue to support you. You've been such an impact on me as a person, but also on my professional career. And the least I could do is to continue supporting you. So thank you, Ty, for everything you do. Before we leave, what advice do you have for the current fellows who are mostly sophomores going into junior year, so rising juniors?
Yeah, so I mean, the big thing for me when I was at that point in my college career, I had finished my first full year at NKU. I had found the Econ club, what capacity it was in at that point. For me, it was all about having the long term in mind. There was opportunities that presented themselves to me that technically meant I got paid less on the hour for my part time job, but in the end, it's well worth it, especially if you're not like blowing every paycheck, right? So I think keep a long term growth mindset. What isn't the most appealing in the short run might not be the most appealing in the long run either. So make sure you always have that kind of uh, next step in mind, especially because you are so young and you're learning so much. You never know what's around the corner. Also, it's kind of counterintuitive traditionally, but being vulnerable is a good thing. Being vulnerable to try and fail, even if that means you didn't, I mean, trying and failing, you can often learn a lot from that. Also, a lot of people have a problem with this, but I always like to trust first and then see what happens, because especially at this point, so many people are going to be offering you things. It's always a good idea to see what it's out there. Not to dig too deep into the weeds with this, but I remember one of my first kind of professional experiences while I was in college is I went to that career fair the College of Business offers every year. And there's a company that goes every year. I won't badmouth or name names, but it's pretty much a pyramid scheme. But they're a pretty well known company. But I went to like 3 or 4 interviews with them, fancy offices, fancy stuff, talking about cool stuff. And at the end of it, they're like, okay, now we want you to recruit 20 of your friends and family to buy our stuff. And I'm like, no, I'm not going to do that. So even though the opportunity itself wasn't what it cracked up to be, I learned from that. I had practice interviews pretty much, got to sit in front of people who make decisions. And I learned from the experience. So big things, be vulnerable, often results in good things. Trust trust people, because oftentimes most of them have your best interest in heart, and take new opportunities as they come, because there's going to be a lot of them coming at you. But take 1 or 2 a year and see what happens. You never know where it's going to turn out.
Really great advice. And yeah, this Hail Fellows program does not exist if trust was not a cornerstone of what we do, and therefore allow people to be vulnerable and take on new opportunities. So Ty, thank you so much for summing it all up, and thank you for coming back and influencing the next generation of fellows. You are relatively young. Don't listen to Fawaz and him calling you old. I appreciate you, Ty, and I look forward to the next time we meet up for a catch up, and all of the exciting things that are happening in your personal life. So thank you.
Thank you, Dr. A.